I was trying to separate my brain between surrender and just total passivity, which I know it doesn't really mean that. But where do you, in practicality, where do you actually see the difference? And what kind of came to me is that I know that I'm in a state of surrender when I'm not attaching to the result of the actions. I'm leaving the result of the actions up to God. So if it looks like there's something that needs to be done and I need to figure out to the best of my ability how to do it, but then not trying to control the result of that. You know, I do what it is I see that needs to be done, but then after that, I just kind of surrender it. Those are my thoughts, and I'm interested in what you think about that.
Okay. Well, I don't have any thoughts on it, but often an answer comes anyway, you see. So with me, I often don't have any particular thoughts about things. I don't have a view. But when a question's asked, then an answer comes. So that's how it works for me. So I don't have any understanding or view on that, really. However, what you have described is a traditional teaching. I don't know if you're aware of that. Of not being attached to the results of actions. In the scriptures, they don't call it the results of actions. They use a bit more colourful language. They call it the fruits of the labour, fruits of the actions. So it's not being attached to the fruits. Because the language that's used in the scripture is of the language of karma, of cause and effect, is actually, again, it's an agricultural metaphor they use about planting the seeds being the causes, and that sprouts, gives rise to some kind of flowering plant or tree, and then that yields fruit. So that's the way cause and effect is often described in the scriptures, but not being attached to the fruits of your works, the fruits of your labor. This is called karma yoga, and it's an aspect of surrender. Surrender is much more intuitive. There's no real rules. So how practical should it be? Again, it's intuitive. Some people, they'll surrender and they won't look after themselves practically. And that's their path. And bad things might happen, you know. They might lose a lot of money. People may take advantage of them. That's their path. It's not the path I recommend, but it might be your path. It might be a part of your path. Just to put that out there. As you know, I always recommend a sort of practical way where you just do what you need to do to look after the body mind. But actually, your intuition will guide you. When you ask the question about surrender, the difference between passivity, doing nothing, and versus some kind of engagement. This question is discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. And one of the answers given, there are various answers given at different points in the text. One of the answers that's given is that the body will be active. Just try and not do anything and see what happens. The body will need to do things. Even very, very basic physical functions, eating, drinking, going to the toilet. These things will happen. You'll be sitting in meditation, eventually you'll feel thirsty. Or you need to pop to the loo and go to the toilet. And everything else is really just a kind of like that. You know, something that will happen in your life and you'll have to deal with it. and you'll find your body just deals with it. So that's answering that part of your question about how active or passive should you be. It's intuitive. It will happen. Ramana used to say, what is destined to happen will happen. All you've got to do is be still. He said, whatever is destined for you will happen, even if you don't want it to happen. And what is not destined for you will not happen, even if you do want it to happen. So the best thing is to do is just to be still. The other part of your question was, how do I know when I have ventured out into the world? Before I've done it. It's a good question, yeah, right? It's a logical question. And it's an intelligent question. Because if you can crack that, then maybe you'll stop going into the sun and stop getting burnt, isn't it? Well, it does assume, the assumption is there that if you know that you're going to go out into the sun and get burnt, you won't do it. That's one assumption. which hopefully we all know is a false assumption, right? Many times you'll be walking into the sun, you'll be walking deeper into that vasana, and you'll know exactly what you're doing, as it were, as much as you're able to, and you'll carry on, because that's what it is to be a seeker. That's what it is to suffer. That's what it is when you think you're the body mind. So that doesn't really go until you're abiding as self always, which is realization. One simple way, though, is to practice abiding as the self, practice surrender more and more. Because when you practice it more and more, it becomes more and more pleasant, more and more beautiful. It's so much more satisfying than the other way of living, than going into the sun, sitting in the cool shade. I know this, I mean, here in the UK, it's getting colder. So this metaphor kind of, I wish it was reversed sometimes, I wish it was like sitting in the sun and going into the shade. But, it doesn't feel so refreshing to sit in the shade right now. I don't know for those of you who've been to London before, whenever it's sunny in London, when it's not coronavirus time especially, anytime it's sunny in London or any busy place in England, every single sort of green space with a bit of sun on it, you see people just sort of sunbathing and getting out there, because it doesn't happen all the time. You walk through central London, you'll see people just sort of sitting on any green patch of grass they can find when it's sunny. But the more time you spend abiding as the self, you will notice the difference. When you go back into the world, you'll notice a difference, because immediately it feels like suffering. Whereas if you don't abide as a self, you will think it's normal when you go into the sun. You'll think it's normal when you go into the world. That's your norm. So you don't recognize that as being suffering. You just think that's what it is to be alive. Does that make sense? When you abide as a self, you feel how wonderful it feels, how whole it feels, how you're full of love. You're one with everything. It's total love. So when the mind starts to go outside, suddenly it's hugely constricting. It feels totally different. I'm trying to think of another example. Nothing springs to mind. But hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yes, it does. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. So it's a feeling thing for me, at least, anyway. But you know, even though I talk about the path of knowledge a lot, my path was very much the path of love, bhakti, path of surrender. It's the same thing, as I say. But to be in love with Ramana, to feel love for him, then to find him within you, in your heart, and to abide with him there, and to merge with him. What we're talking about, again, I'm going to use dualistic language, so please allow me to use this dualistic language. What we're really talking about is total merger with the divine, total total union, total merger, like dissolving into. That's not the part. It's more loving than that. It's like being lost. It's um, it's like being totally embraced and being not lost in that embrace, but becoming one with that embrace and being lost in that embrace. It's coming home. It's coming home, dissolving and becoming total love. Total divine, totally divine. One with him. As I said, this is the meaning of the word yoga. That's what yoga means. Yoga means to become one with him. One with that.